I'm David Reed, and this is The Engine Room. Welcome to The Engine Room. Today we have a special guest, Scott Livingston. Thank you, Scott, for coming.
Thank you. Honored to be here.
Yeah.
Not sure about the special part, but...
Well, I say it about everyone, so you're not that special
right.
after all.
You should. That's right.
So let's start with, where were you born?
I was born up in the Dallas-Fort Worth area in Arlington, but we rapidly moved to College Station.
Rapidly.
Yes.
Like that night.
Like
you were born and...
Like I have no recollection of Arlington whatsoever.
And you moved to where?
College Station, just
College
down the road.
Station. You got there as fast as you could.
Just as fast as we could.
I'm going to assume there's an Aggie in there somewhere.
There is. My father is an Aggie, and he got a job with the university.
Really?
And this was in the early 70s. And so that was...
You had no choice.
That's right. I was brainwashed. So grew up in College Station in the 70s and 80s, and
really?
that was
that's
a very,
changed.
Very different environment than it is today.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Different.
It must have been. What about what size was it back then?
Oh, I mean, the population was probably 20,000, not counting the students.
Yeah.
It was a college town.
Yeah.
Very simple. Great place to grow up from the standpoint of you hopped on your bike and rode all over town and visiting your friends and driving around the campus. And
nice.
But it was a very cloistered experience too.
Yeah.
There was no industry there.
Yeah.
All I knew was the university.
That was the whole point.
That was the whole point.
Is that not true today? I don't even know.
It's much more diversified now.
Okay.
Yeah. The university is larger, more retirement communities, and more industry.
Wow.
So it's a big city now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there's a giant stadium there. That's all I know.
The big milestone was when the Olive Garden arrived.
Oh, really?
I probably was in university or getting close to graduating, and I just remember my parents thought, "Wow, fine dining has arrived." I mean, College Station had really grown up.
Pretty fancy stuff.
That's right. No longer just a Red Lobster, but we had an Olive Garden.
That's great. What did you like to do as a kid? What were your interests?
Play sports.
Yeah.
Of course, I had dreams of being the all-star baseball player, football, the quarterback.
Oh, all of it, any of those?
All of it. But I started playing golf at an early age and in high school.
Because of the great golf courses?
Because of the great golf courses.
I'm trying to imagine today. I'm from Scotland. I'm trying to imagine great golf courses.
Of College Station.
College Station.
Today they've got some good courses. When I was growing up, I played on the university course that I think was built on a landfill.
Right. Way to sell it.
But it was an easy bike ride.
Yeah.
And it was great for a kid.
So you played a lot of golf?
I played a lot of golf. Wow. And that's what I ended up playing most of the time in high school.
Yeah.
And had aspirations of maybe playing beyond high school.
Right.
But my senior year realized that was not going to be the case.
You weren't at that. It's a level.
It's a level. It's a
small group that get to go do that.
Yeah, so it was time to refocus.
Yeah.
Refocus.
Yeah. So in school, in your junior and high school, what were your interests? Other than golf, obviously.
Other than golf.
Live off of that.
Oh, gosh. I mean, I really enjoyed music. I actually enjoyed reading, traveling, even though at that time we were really just traveling around the state of Texas.
Yeah, going to the big places.
The big places. But my father's role with the university required him to travel to a lot of the regional locations that the university was involved in throughout the state of Texas.
So you got to see all
So I got
over.
to see some, really bright spots like Harlingen, Texas.
Yeah, I was thinking of the good ones.
And Amarillo.
Yeah.
So we traveled all around the state. I knew every La Quinta that was built.
You should write a book. Yeah, La Quintas I've known.
Exactly. Yeah. So pretty simple. I enjoy the math and sciences.
Yeah.
Those were my talents. Compared to literature and language and other things.
So then, what did that lead you to a college decision?
It did. I mean, I decided to attend A&M. My friends and cousins had gone there.
Yeah, I understand. There is no choice. If your family is A&M, you seem to be very common that you would.
I settled on majoring in industrial engineering.
Oh, really?
And which is what my cousin 4 years ahead of me had majored in, and I knew enough to be dangerous that appealed to enough technical, but also wasn't specifically a design oriented endeavor. It would
more
process, and so that appealed to me.
Yeah,
kind of best of both worlds.
Yeah.
Now, I had to endure the harassment of all the other engineering disciplines,
right,
including my girlfriend that became my wife, who was a biomedical engineer.
So she was
that derisively, derisively
still is.
Yeah, yes, to this day, and now my daughter is an engineer. But anyway, they all the other engineering disciplines called industrial engineers imaginary engineers.
Imagineering, like
and it wasn't meant
engineering
from innovation.
Engineering what? Like, show me your machine.
I think they were trying to imply a fake engineer.
Yeah, there's show me the engine in this engineer.
Yeah.
You're like, well, it's people and process. And,
that's right, too touchy-feely.
Yeah, too touchy-feely. Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, but it was good. But probably the most significant thing I did was decide to join the Corps Cadets, which was a small military-esque type institution
inside the college,
inside the university.
Yeah.
Only 2,000 students were involved in the Corps Cadets of what at that time was 45 to 50,000 students.
Wow!
So it was like having almost like a service academy within a university.
And you would, when people join that, how does that work? You just go, hey, I want to be a part of this, and then what does that mean?
After gaining admittance to the university, anybody can join.
Yeah. So it kind of implies you have an interest in the military side, or
a lot of folks.
Yeah.
But in the end, probably 25% of folks in the Corps end up pursuing a military career.
Yeah. So what do you do in that group? How does that work?
You're assigned to an outfit.
Okay.
In my case, a squadron. I went into to the Air Force part of the Corps.
Yeah.
And so you're assigned to an outfit, and that's who you live with.
Yeah. Oh, really?
You make best friends for life. It's like joining a fraternity.
Okay.
You're assigned a class, and those are at that time the gentlemen that were my classmates, and we had to endure all the traditions and rules and regulations of being a freshman in a military outfit.
Yeah.
You fell out for formations.
Really? Exercises.
Everything. Run early in the morning, and it was just part of being in a military experience within the context of university.
So you get to feel something to decide. Really, is this what I want? Or I certainly. Right. So that's interesting.
Or a lot of people just enjoy from the tradition of the university of originally being a military institution.
Oh, okay.
Which is when my father went to school there. It was all military.
Oh, really? Okay.
As the origin of the school, and a lot of people just like that traditional aspect of being part of that military camaraderie.
And I think when you have it in your family, I mean, we had cadets in high school and secondary school in Britain, and I was part of that. My family were Air Force. I did Air Force. It was
right.
It was a thing, but not everyone did. It was a small group as well for us. But yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, I did decide to accept what was called an ROTC scholarship, so a scholarship from the military, from the Air Force, to pay for the rest of my experience at university, which was obviously helpful.
Yeah.
But then after I graduated, I was commissioned into the Air Force, and
so you were
had an obligation
one of the 25%.
Yeah. One of the 25. It's probably even smaller now, but
yeah.
I mean, within my outfit of 22 freshmen, we had 12 to 14 finish, and 2 of us entered the Air Force.
Okay.
So really
only
small
the
percentage.
best of the best.
Only the best of the best. The other ones went off to be lawyers and doctors and all those sorts of things. I mean, whatever. Yeah.
You have a better story.
Yeah, those guys missed out. Yeah.
So that's great. So did you feel, was that something just in the process you're like, I really like this, and they were trying to woo you, I guess, into that, or how did that work?
Yeah, I was, frankly, at that time of my life, I did not have a lot of ambitions.
Yeah.
Remember, I grew up in College Station. It wasn't an industry town. My father worked at campus. I didn't know capitalism.
Right.
I didn't know the business world.
Yeah.
I didn't know what I enjoyed the industrial engineering.
Yeah.
I didn't really have a clear sense of where that would lead me to a career. My uncle had been in the Air Force as a pilot. I had visited him a number of times. Was intrigued by that
You
career.
You thought it was a pirate when you heard it, and you were like, "That sounds exciting."
Yeah.
No, pilot does. Honestly, that was my interest too.
Yeah,
Was the idea
yeah.
of planes, and
Yeah.
that was very interesting.
Yeah. So the scholarship and the opportunity to get pulled in a direction that I didn't know where it would lead me was intriguing. It was very I was fearful in some ways because I grew up in somewhat of a cloistered
sheltered
existence.
kind of world.
We didn't travel outside the state of Texas. I certainly did not know what a passport was. I've never even seen one.
Yeah.
And so the Air Force pulled me out of my comfort zone.
And you have a girlfriend at this time or a wife by then?
When I reported to my first day of active duty, I had a fiance.
Okay.
And we married 6 months later.
Wow.
After I finished my first training school.
Okay.
And then
she
accompanied
was
me.
excited about it, or she just
Oh,
thought,
no.
well,
Oh, no.
you're an industrial engineer, you probably should do something else.
I know she hoped that this was a short-term passing
flight
fancy.
of fancy, you know. Yeah, do your little military thing.
That's right. That's right.
She was hoping it would not lead to dangerous environments.
That's
probably.
right. That's right. But it was transformative for me in a lot of good ways.
Yeah.
Like I said, pulled me out of my comfort zone, exposed me to the great big world.
Yeah. So what was that like? I mean, I assume what was your first experiences?
I was assigned to the initial cadre of a new weapon system. It was called the B-2 Stealth Bomber.
Wow.
It was just being pulled out of what we call the black world to an operational
Very cool.
bomber wing that we stood up. And in the middle of Missouri, it needed to be in a remote, secluded location.
Wow. And Missouri is that?
In Missouri was that. The neat thing was that I had the opportunity to immediately work with just an amazing group of professionals, both officers and enlisted, that had, a lot of really wonderful experiences, had been in the military much longer, had been in combat previously. I was entering the military when combat operations were not underway.
Right.
In that between the first two, in the middle of the first two Gulf Wars.
Yeah.
And I say the first two. I hope there's not a third, but the way things are going today.
Please no. If anyone is watching and can stop that, please do.
Yeah. But it was a great experience. I mean, a new weapon system, a stealth technology, a lot of great people. It helped me form a lot of behaviors and traits and define, new values to me that would hopefully serve me well for the rest of my career.
Yeah, my father would always say that his time in the Air Force was Royal Air Force, the better one. He's always said it just gave him all discipline was his number one need that he got out of it was just life discipline,
Yeah. It taught me right off the bat humbleness.
Yeah.
In the sense that I'm a second lieutenant.
Yeah.
I'm in charge.
Yeah.
I have hundreds of airmen that work for me to support the aircraft, but I know nothing.
Yeah.
I don't have any experience
what a
working on an
gift early
aircraft.
on.
Yeah.
Is to understand you don't know something. Which
Exactly.
I think is a gift.
So thankfully I'd had enough sage advice
to
approach this in the right manner.
Yeah.
And demonstrate that I wanted to learn. I needed to learn.
Yeah.
I needed to demonstrate, strong interpersonal skills.
Right.
Needed to be supportive and figure out where I could make contributions.
Yeah.
And just establish trust, with all the colleagues I was working with.
Yeah.
And gain experiences and competence and capabilities over time.
Experience. Yeah.
So that was a lot of fun and a lot of change in my life at that time.
So how long was that exposure?
That assignment was 3.5 years, and then we moved to Georgia, and I was involved in another new weapon system and what I call the coat and tie aspect of the Air Force.
Huh.
I was now involved in the program management, so in acquisition. So I was helping buy and manage a new surveillance platform for the Air Force. Working with a lot of defense contractors, other agencies within the Air Force.
Yeah.
So that now started to introduce me to, I'll say capitalism in the business world, and working with defense contractors.
Yeah.
And that lasted 3.5 years.
So you were 7 years in?
Yeah, 7 years, just shy of 8 years.
And then
through a process of interviewing with a lot of Fortune 500 companies.
So you were. I mean, here's my version of the story of you turning up, where I know we were looking, and I don't know if you came to Varco first, did you?
Yes, I did.
Okay, because I knew we were trying to hire junior military officers. That was on our
exactly,
and that was kind of, I guess that was the program that you were within.
That's right.
Because we were just, I think, late 90s. We were just starting to put rigs out of packages. It was new for us.
Yes.
But I think that's when you came in, right?
100%. Stepped right into the
mess.
Right into the mix.
The mess at the time. We didn't know what we were doing back then, but we were trying to put it together.
There was one prominent firm that worked with junior military officers in helping facilitate opportunities with a lot of corporate America.
Yeah.
And
they
Varco,
they have an event, or they
they have a couple events a year, and so I would in my case, after going through a lot of preparation, I was actually attended a conference in, coincidentally, Austin.
Yeah,
they have one on the East Coast too. And so I interviewed with a lot of companies, and Varco was one of them.
Yeah.
It was the Varco from the fellas that were over in Cedar Park, because that's where a lot of the project management was at that time for Varco drilling equipment. And then you would fly to various locations for second interviews.
Yeah.
And so I was completely unfamiliar with the oil field.
Yeah.
I had some opportunities with some other mainstream Fortune 500 companies, including some of the main consultancies, to go up to D.C. and in Maryland and Minnesota, and Varco really intrigued me because it was a small company. It had a family feel.
Yeah.
I thought, do I go work at a large company like a GE?
Yeah.
That's been around forever.
Yeah.
Has a very rigid, defined culture. Yeah, very established.
Yeah.
Or do I go work for a company that's seemingly the Wild West, that I feel like I could make an impact and more rapidly?
Yeah.
And so kind of rolled the dice, and we went with that.
Unfortunately, it didn't work out, and you're still here.
I know. Yeah.
No, it was that era. It was a wild era, but there was a culture that was really attractive to all of that. I think that was the same for me. That drew me in was just the way people were, but it was wild.
And the projects and opportunities they were describing to me were industrial, technology, global.
Yeah.
And coming out of the military, that was very familiar to me.
Right.
And so I was not looking for an office job to just sit behind a desk. I wanted to get out and travel and continue to do things.
You did, yeah.
And so little did I know how much it was going to become. Yeah. But it was
consuming. It was wild, but
it
was the beginning of us learning how to do projects. Really, I mean, although there was a lot of pain.
Right.
I think your first jobs were the Pride jobs, weren't they? Or was there something before that?
I stepped into finishing the Express rigs.
Oh, wow.
Remember those?
Wow.
Unique beast.
So you had a French theme.
That's right.
Either way, because were you in shipyard by the time you
we were leaving the shipyard.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, my first trip was actually to Gran Canaria for 2 of the Express rigs, and
I think they were the craziest design of rigs that existed. You probably didn't know. You probably just thought this is a drilling rig.
Right.
But they had decided to write the code in the shipyard for everything.
Yes.
It was a nightmare.
Yes, it was. Hence, it needed a project manager to finish the project, because I believe they had been going on for a number of years.
It was a discipline we didn't really have, and you were part of bringing that in, as establishing how do you make these things happen. Whereas I think before we just turned up, like we didn't have project managers, and we just would try our best and lots of finger pointing.
Yeah,
and that was a mix. That's
Yeah.
that's interesting. You had those first experiences. Wow.
So right, the Pride projects were next,
Yeah.
and when those kicked off, which were being sold to Exxon and BP for
Yeah.
the spars and TLPs, and of course Pride was designing and constructing the platforms,
Yeah.
the drilling platform, and we had the equipment, the drilling equipment packages. We rapidly moved to Houston,
Yeah.
and so relocated pretty quickly, which was not something we anticipated doing, getting out of the military and having moved around a few times.
You thought, finally, I'm in the real world where no one moves.
Yeah. So that white picket fence eluded us,
Yeah.
and we moved to Houston. But it was a good time. Our daughter was entering kindergarten,
Okay.
so it was a good
So
time
not
to
that
go ahead and make the
disruptive,
move.
yeah.
And it was obvious that the center of gravity for Varco drilling equipment was migrating from Orange, California to Houston,
Yeah, it
and the
was-
projects were Houston based. And so it all added up to the right thing to do.
Do you remember how many people were in the office when you turned up? Was it in the, because we went from like 4 to 20 to 50. It was probably in the 20s or 50s.
Probably.
Because it was just starting to evolve upstairs at West Little York.
It was changing rapidly.
Yeah.
Absolutely changing rapidly. And soon after I relocated to Houston is when more folks from Orange, California started
That's right.
relocating to
Yeah.
Houston.
We were talking about moving everybody at that point, and only a few moved, but some
Right.
moved. Yeah, I remember
Right.
that. Yeah.
But it was a great opportunity for me being involved in those projects.
Yeah.
In that I was working with a number of the larger Varco and some key industry partners in the projects.
Yeah.
So I got to know the guys from Brent.
Yeah.
That's how I met Mark Laperouse and Billy Martin and
Early
other
days of all
colleagues.
of that.
And,
Yeah, that was our first package with that.
obviously
yeah.
Schaefer. And, so it was very, very exciting.
Very formative. And I think, trying to think through everything. We'd had most of our worst. No, we'd come through our worst disasters at that point. I'm trying to think what was going on. But that was the beginning of our learnings. I think because for me, moving us to shipyards were because of those projects, because the weakness in the system was clearly
Right.
in the shipyard.
Right.
But that was an experience, and I think we made money and we were on time, on budget, which was a first in any construction project that we'd ever done.
Yeah.
And I think everyone thought we were going to lose money on
That's
all of
right.
them.
That's
so there
right.
was a lot of fear of this is going to be like all that came before it, because we
Right.
were loading in new projects at the time. Yeah, what an experience. So where did you go from there?
I started working on some of the Singapore-based projects
Yeah.
that kicked off the NDC and the
beginning of
that some
Jack-
project sales guy from Varco. I
Got
don't
us
know who
in
that guy
trouble.
was. Yeah.
They literally, on the NDC project, I received a call, stop selling packages. and it was NDC, and everyone was nervous about NDC. But you could see that we were on there is some standardization here. We're going to be okay, but everyone in management was terrified. But we did. It was the beginning. It was the third of the first set of the Mod 5. I think it was a Mod
Right.
5B. It was slightly different on that job. But yeah, what a project to be on as well. You're picking them at this point.
Yeah. New projects for the company. Meeting more and more folks. I remember my first trip to the Middle East, and it was to Abu Dhabi to meet with NDC and
Yeah.
Graham Carnegie, who's obviously still.
Still can't get a
still
job
with
like
us.
the rest of us somewhere else.
we traveled over there with some others and
Yeah.
went through these risk assessments with NDC, and that was a fantastic cultural experience.
Yeah,
and now I'm going to Singapore, and I'm meeting great folks like Jimmy Lim and his boss at the time, Paul Singh.
That's
and,
right.
They were just
All the classic-
invaluable in helping us get established and to
the
support the
relationships,
projects over there.
long-term relationships, because Keppel ended up being a really strong relationship through that era.
Right.
Very important for us.
Right.
Yeah, so you were at the core of that. And what were you doing? Were you doing the installation part, or what?
No, I was doing the projects at that
Okay,
point.
so project management.
But helping formulate some folks to run the installation.
Right. This is why it worked.
This is why it was starting.
We managed to make something happen there that solved our problems in the shipyards.
Right. Right.
Were you part of that, or what were you?
Yeah,
doing?
I was in the shipyards quite a bit. I remember actually standing on NDC's rig floor as we were doing the final commissioning.
Yeah.
It had a very unique top drive racking system, if you remember that.
Yeah.
that cantilevered over the jeweler's cabin because they wanted to be able to run manual and put a power swivel in there to run with a Kelly.
It was
a crazy project.
It was a really weird. I doubt they ever ran a Kelly in their life,
right.
But we had to design it
and of course, you know, and we were working with third-party designer for the derrick at that time. You know, being a Varco, we did not have the derrick in our portfolio.
We had shut down from having derricks in our portfolio. We briefly had a company and closed it because it couldn't make money, and that was the beginning of the new third parties. We did about 6 of them in a row or something like that after that, but it was a way to make money because we were doing so bad at derricks. But that was.
Then in 2005 is when Joe hired me to run service for the Americas.
Okay.
For Varco.
Yeah.
And so that was a neat step in my career.
Yeah.
I feel like I was in the job for 48 hours because at that time 2 things happened. We merged.
Yeah.
With National Oil.
I've heard of them.
And they needed somebody to go to Kazakhstan to get involved in this crazy project that at that time
you were in that.
Kevin Neveu had signed up called
it was his
The
fault,
Island.
Kevin, when you watch this, we
That's
know.
right.
We know you did it. The Island.
Yeah.
It was painful, eh?
Yeah, but anyway, it was a very challenging, unique experience.
Yeah.
Going to Kazakhstan in 2005. It was still the wild, wild west. It was Ataral was not a single Western establishment was there.
Yeah.
And then transiting to an offshore island in the North Caspian Sea in the dead of winter, living on a Russian ship, and finishing construction, and it took weeks for us to get supplies in.
And we'd signed up for everything, if I remember.
That's right. It
was a complete supply, which wasn't normal for any of us.
It was a full turnkey EPC, 2,000-3,000 horsepower land rigs with all the support structure for the island.
Yeah.
And it was a huge project, and spent a lot of time there involved in that project because it was just the logistics of getting in and out of Kazakhstan and getting into Ataral were not feasible for me to rotate on any sort of a regular basis.
Yeah. So you were basically based there.
It turned into an almost full time. You know, what I thought might be a 4-and-4 standard rotation for project turned into more of something akin to 6 to 8 weeks on, and if lucky, 2 weeks off.
And so, just to clean up the story here, your wife had said, "I'm not so sure about you being in the military."
It was.
And here you are gone all the time, which honestly, a lot of things happen in those days where you were gone all the time. But
in some ways, it was a blessing to be at a remote location, focused on a project while Varco and National Oil were still merging and going through those growing pains, and so in some ways that was fortuitous.
Yeah.
You know, going back to the project, and you mentioned my wife. My wife's father was a senior executive with a national trucking firm based out of Northwest Arkansas. And as I was seeking his advice when I was contemplating leaving the military and getting involved in the business world, and one thing that he mentioned to me that always stuck with me was that early on in your career, every company has a challenge.
Yeah.
And they need somebody that's going to raise their hand and respond to that challenge and make some sacrifices.
Right.
I mean, maybe it's working late at night, maybe it's doing some weekends, maybe it's traveling for a remote assignment. And D Island was that project for the company at that time. And so in some ways I was honored to be both honored and probably the last man standing. But it was that project that, I mentioned Kevin earlier, but that's how I met Kevin, and I'm good friends with him to this day.
Right. Yeah. We all bonded.
That's how I met Pete right off the bat. Right. Met Clay
because it was the
right
most
off
important thing going on.
It was a big project.
There was a lot of bleeding of money in the middle of that.
Right.
So it was trying to manage the pain. Yeah.
Yeah. And literally, it was cobbling together a team of folks, both from folks that I knew.
Yeah.
And some folks that had been involved in the D Island project, and going over there and working with a lot of contractors that had been brought in from around the world to finish this construction project and then commissioning this installation. And it was a fascinating experience. And was it hard on the family at that time? With an 8-year-old daughter that I basically checked out for almost a year. Yeah, it was tough. It was rough.
Yeah, I think a lot of people go through that, but it's when it's the right time to really invest. So I think that was a really good comment on, there's times you have to do this stuff, and it doesn't last forever, but it is important at the time.
That's right.
Yeah, that's really good. Right. That's really good. I completely missed that in your story. I mean, we see each other, know each other. I just didn't, because it was such, like you say, it was craziness back here.
I think a lot of people thought I had left the company. I mean,
because people did walk out. There was some people were gone and were like, "Oh, Scott, you came back?"
I disappeared. I mean, I literally disappeared, and this project was not part of the mainstream organization.
No, I heard about it where I was, just because we were looking at where's the money coming in and where's they're paying, and that was one of the very focused areas. There was a few that were just troubled projects that had high risk on them, and you were right in the middle of making that happen.
Yeah, but credit to Kevin, to Joe, I was supported well.
Yeah,
and so that was fantastic.
Yeah. And I think, Kevin, for me, was a Draco guy. It was an easy mix. When it was people you'd already worked with, I found a lot of it easier than most. Most people are like, who is this guy? I'm like, well, it's Kevin. We've known him. I'd known him since the beginning of his career. So it was very comfortable for me, but not for a lot of people. It was all new. And you'd spend years saying that the other guys are the bad guys, your competitor. So when you merge with them, people go, oh, this can't be good. And it wasn't true. We were very, very similar. So there was a lot of good,
Yeah, that's right.
That's good. So from there, what?
Well, the projects continued to accumulate in the shipyards in Asia.
Yeah.
And at the conclusion of my involvement with the island, Joe asked me to consider going to Singapore as an expat.
From Kazakhstan to Singapore. That's an improvement in islands.
Yes,
yes. You go from the island.
A big improvement, yeah.
Your island upgrade.
That's right.
It's a little bit warmer.
Yeah, there's no Russian ships to live on.
Right.
No horse meat to eat. It's a big change. And it was a good timing. My wife was very supportive.
Yeah.
In some ways, she asked, will I see you more often? And the answer was, well, at that time, I thought yes, and so she said, let's do it. Yeah. And we packed up and went. Yeah. But it was a magical time, and it was Gene Downey and I and a lot of other great team members were building an organization from scratch. So now we were taking this somewhat informal group of folks that were working in shipyards to help with the installation and commissioning, and now turning it into a full-fledged organization that we needed literally thousands of people in Singapore, Korea, China, the Middle East, and a few other cats and dogs.
It was an amazing build-out of talent. And,
right.
The best of our best at managing our pain up until that point were around to understand how not to get in those problems. And I think it differentiated us from the one thing that by the end of that big cycle that was hitting was we were on time, on budget. And every time. And I remember I met the guy who ran the Chinese final buyout of systems, and it was almost all NOV. And the guy had never met anyone from NOV, and I said, why, if you've never met anyone, why are you choosing us? And he goes, because I've done my homework, and everything's on time, on budget, and your competitors are not. And so that moment in time and the things you guys did was fundamental in building the company.
I remember sitting in Houston with Joe and his management team. And Kevin Neville actually came over to visit with us and talk, and that was when we formulated the tech school.
Yeah.
That was when we all agreed that
at that time.
We knew that we were going to need
pipeline of people.
We needed a massive pipeline
that was Joe's
of
term.
Trained folks in order to both work in the shipyards and then support the vessels.
Yeah, we couldn't hire them; we had to train them.
And so we needed to take matters into our own hands.
Yeah, isn't that wild?
And so that was a big step. And it was just an amazing time. And like you said, a lot of people in the industry did not think NOV would succeed. Well, there was no way we would be able to deliver and support the amount of product that we were putting out into the industry.
As we were beginning, most of our leadership team wasn't sure that we were going to. I mean, there was a lot of nervousness about this build and could we execute. I remember Kevin's charts at the time. I was I called myself the VP of PPT, which was Kevin's PowerPoint maker, and we would build these like crazy slides about how are we going to meet this need. And I think most people, like all of us in the oil field, thought it's not going to last. It's going to end. Like the next order, that's the last one. You know, we just felt that way, but we had to take a risk and build out to deliver. Yeah, that's crazy. So how long were you in Singapore?
I was in Singapore for 6 years. And then Joe asked me to come back to Houston.
Yeah.
At that time, Mark Reese, who was president of RIG, had reorganized RIG. You know, we were massive in size, as you remember,
point,
into an offshore and land businesses. And Joe was appointed as the president of offshore, and he needed a.
It was a smart move. He's like, I'll take offshore.
Right.
Give Scott land.
He needed a VP of offshore for the Americas, so I returned to Houston and took over that role. And now I was working with all of our production plants and our organizations.
Oh, I thought
that
you
were
went to
geared.
land from that.
That was shortly after that.
Yeah, it was a bait and switch.
Right,
they got you in for.
Spent a couple of years working with the offshore designated operations for North America and South America, and that. That brought me in working directly with Orange, California, and PCG,
all the plants
and
Brazil,
all the
I guess,
and,
a lot at the time.
Yeah, and so it was really neat, and we were starting to build up in Brazil for the projects that were being signed up down there.
It was the beginning of that idea. Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah.
And so that was an exciting time, and then in 2014 is when Tasso retired from the company.
It was 14 that you got that job.
Right, and that's when I moved into land. Just in time to get smacked in the face with what had happened in the shale revolution and then the downturn. Yeah,
it was like we're going up, and we're going down.
That's right.
Wow.
But that was my first time to work in the onshore.
Yeah, your whole career
industry.
Would have been offshore.
Whole career had been offshore to that point.
Wild difference.
And it was, especially in the U.S., it was massively different. Massively different.
Yeah.
I remember being summoned to Galena Park early in this new position.
And it's fair to say not a Keppel shipyard.
No. And I had been told by the team that it looks like we're going to deliver our ideal rig a day late. It's like a day late.
Yeah.
It's like in the shipyards. I mean, if the
ecosystem
was 1 week late, that was like a victory on just as far as going out to sea trials and then deploying. I'm like 1 day late. I mean, okay, sure, I'll come down and meet the customer. and I went down there and met this gentleman who was running this small drilling contractor and had been in the industry for his whole career, and he chewed me up one side and down and just educated.
This is going to be a great meeting.
Educated me rapidly on how significant this delay was to everything that was staged for U.S. lower 48, getting on location and going to work. And so that was a rapid education in the drivers for onshore land, which were different than offshore.
What an experience, just to jump into that.
Yeah, so anyway, I did that for a little while until the downturn happened and we collapsed RIG back into a functional organization. And at that point then oversaw our production and engineering in mobile rigs.
Right.
The business.
Then did you progress out to RIG after that?
I did in 2018 is when I moved over to run intervention stimulation equipment. And that was
another change.
Another fantastic experience getting into the completion side of the business, which again had a very different from the drilling side.
Yeah.
And really enjoyed working with these businesses that had been acquired over the years that were involved in coil tubing strings and our pressure pumping and wireline and Anson, our valves and flow line, and it was
all new words, new business.
That's right, new business, new customers, and really, over time we put together a great team. Hired a few new folks from the outside.
Yeah.
As new business leaders.
Yeah, it was an aging out time.
Yeah.
Where suddenly, because we'd had a decade or more of that business being run with the same folks, and suddenly there was retirements.
We had some turnovers and retirements, and two of the business leaders that I brought in are business unit presidents today. One works for me in EPS, and one works for Joe in EE. Yeah. And so I'm very, very proud of those hires, and very proud and very impressed, obviously, with what they've done. And they're great business leaders. And great experiences that you brought in, adding to your team where you needed. Yeah. You had a lot of gap, which I think from the beginning of your story, it's a constant going into places that I'm not sure I know everything here. But being willing and pushing through and building teams, and that is the key. That is the key. You have to be open-minded. Yeah. Obviously, have a desire to learn. Yeah. And then figure out where you can provide the right support. Yeah. In order to help steer the organization and most importantly provide an avenue for all your teammates to be successful and make contributions, because that's what you want to do. And what about mental attitude? Tell me a bit about. I mean, the last part of the story is your final job, which I don't want to just list all your jobs. That's right. But now you're running a whole segment. But can you talk a bit about just what helped you to be successful in the middle of what were crises after crises after crises, and opportunities were lack of teams, and how do you look at every day in your journey? What is there a way you think, a way you are? How do you do that? I'm a contemplative person. Yeah. I don't swing emotionally very strong one way or the other. Yeah. I think that measured approach helps me in the way it provide an approachable environment. Yeah. For folks that I work with. Yeah. And folks that I need to establish relationships. Mm-hmm. And that I create that kind of open door or aspect. Yeah. Build trust, and then provide an environment where we're able to listen, factor in contributions that people make in regards to suggestions, alternatives. Yeah. And coalesce around the right approach. Okay. And on the flip side of that is, the challenge I think for all leaders that we all have to continue to work on, but's critical, is understand when decisive actions need to be made. Yeah, not be afraid to move when. Whether that's around people, investments, changes in the organization, things of that nature. That's good. Is there someone along the way, or is there a particular leader that you like? Okay, I saw this and I want to be like that. Is there someone? I know you're not prepared for this stuff, but I mean, there's a lot of folks going back to my early Air Force days where some of the most talented leaders in the Air Force were cycling through that base because it was the newest weapon system in the Department of Defense. Right. In the common denominator, in addition to hard work, and when I say hard work, I mean effective work. Yeah. Was that attitude of humbleness. Yeah. That recognized that they needed to be approachable, that they needed to establish a relationship. Right. That, their job is to take in information. Yeah. Work with a team in order to make the most effective decision. But then also realizing that ultimately you're always making decisions with imperfect information. Right. And so you can't be bashful about waiting too long, overanalyzing the situation. Yeah. And then communicating. Yeah. Doing your best to keep everybody informed, which is tough. It's a tough one for me. I'm an ambivert is what one professional consultant labeled me. Yeah. And that meant that I can muster the energy to go out there and engage and in social situations and with folks, but I need to retract. Yeah, you need your time. I need my time, and that's how I recharge. Yeah. And so it's not my natural inclination to want to be out there in front. Yeah, so you have to push yourself there. Yeah. That's right. Yeah. But I recognize that doing that, being present, being at events with the organization, visiting our locations all around the world.
Yeah.
I think I've only got 413 more to go.
Yeah, but probably 413
Yeah.
already under your belt. So you've been running around like a madman.
Yeah.
But you understand that.
Yeah, recognize that's important.
Yeah.
It's important for me. It's important for the organization. The folks
And
that
everyone
are
wants
there.
everyone wants to know who are you and what does that mean to me and how
That's
I do
right.
my job. And so part of why I wanted you on the show was lots of people ask, like, I know you, but people are like, what is he like? And I'm like, not very nice, but you know.
Not very nice at all. Yeah.
No, I think there's a lot of excitement, but I think getting to have you on the show is good for people to just kind of get a feel for you. And next time you're coming to their facility, they can look up and go, okay, let's see what he's like.
Who's this
You know,
guy?
okay, he wants to be a nice
What's
guy.
he
Maybe he
doing?
is, maybe he's not. We'll see. No, it's good. No, I really appreciate it. Appreciate you coming on. Very valuable for everybody. So thank you for
Great.
coming.
Thank you, David. Enjoyed it.
Yeah, and we will see you next time.
All right.